Hi, good evening. It's indeed a pleasure for me to have such a senior person from the field today in the very first series of Empower the Determined. Empower the Determined is a lovely series meant for the professionals in the field as well as for the parents who have plenty of questions on their mind. So to start with, today we have Dr. Martin joining us from London. He has been working as a behavior analyst, as a clinician, academician, supervisor, and a researcher. And who could be a better person to start this series with us? He's been in the field since 1990. He has received his PhD from the University of Reading, UK in 1998 and became a board certified behavior analyst, BCBA, in 2002. He was among the first handful of BCBAs in UK, and he was the one who actually worked for as an ABA lecturer and cooperative that developed the first BCBA approved course sequence in the UK. So we are really delighted to have you with us today. After working within the academia in the field of Kent, Dr. Martin worked independently for many years teaching on a number of BCBAs and BCABAs courses sequence, helping establish others around the world, supervising students, and consulting to numerous organizations and families, both in UK and internationally. Dr. Martin has published researches in various journals, such as Journal of Applied Behavior Analysis, The Behavior Analyst, Research in Developmental Disabilities, and the Journal of Autism and Developmental Disorder. And he has special interest in the use of technology, media, and software related to the teaching and research. Dr. Martin was one of the international subject matter experts that last received the BCBA task list, and he was also one of the subject matter experts that generated the BACB autism task list and the BACB professional and ethical compliance code for the behavior analyst. So we are really delighted to have you with us this evening. In April 2015, Dr. Martin became the BACB Director of International Development to help advance the BACB's global mission and vision and to expand the number of behavior analysts and training courses worldwide. So today we are very delighted to have you with us, sir. And the very first thing I would like you to tell our viewers that what is applied behavior analysis and what it is not.
Okay, thank you for that lovely, albeit lengthy introduction, and good afternoon from me from a rather horrible, cold and wet London afternoon. Okay, what is ABA and what is it not? It's probably easier if I start with saying what it is not, given the huge amount of misunderstanding and misinterpretation of applied behavior analysis. So it is not a therapy, intervention, or teaching method for children with autism. It's not characterized by one-to-one tabletop teaching, intensity of teaching, or early intervention. Now, some people listening may be shocked to hear me say that and perhaps think that's exactly what ABA is, but it's not. It's we've used ABA, or many people use ABA as a common shorthand to describe behavioral intervention for autism, but only because so many people work in that area. And indeed, that is only one of many applications, but probably the most well-known. In terms of what ABA is, it is simply the application of the natural science of behavior analysis to make socially significant changes to human behavior. Some examples include working with the current pandemic and addressing the human behavior problems that are maintaining that, working with issues related to global warming, terrorism, addiction, whether it be gambling or drug addiction. And then, of course, some of the more well-known applications include things like positive behavior support, organizational behavior management, and of course, behavioral intervention for autism. But fundamentally, because ABA is a science, it is, of course, evidence-based, and it's reliant on the research to support the different applications and also on ongoing data collection to ensure that all interventions remain optimally effective.
Thank you very much. Actually, recently I was talking to one of the vet trainers, and he said that this is one of the best training programs for the animals. And I was really impressed. He said for all sorts of training to the dogs and the cats, he uses applied behavior analysis. That was quite impressive. Now, I would like to ask you, Dr. Martin, that what constitutes acceptable training to work as a behavior analyst?
Okay, well, like other fields, such as psychology, medicine, law, and many others, becoming a behavior analyst, or at least becoming credentialed or qualified as a behavior analyst, requires thorough postgraduate academic training and, of course, some supervised hands-on experience. Even when you have those things, you could only say that you have met minimal standards to work independently as a behavior analyst. I would also like to say that one does not develop the necessary skills and competencies with anything less than what I've described, and certainly not by attending workshops or completing some of the online diplomas that are available, just to provide a couple of examples. Those with some more basic training, such as technicians, in terms of implementation of programs and the data collection and so on associated with that, they must work under the supervision and oversight of someone who's appropriately trained. I suppose it's also worth saying that those who say they're behavior analysts and who have had some training, or at least say they've had some training, continue to do immeasurable harm to the field and probably put consumers off wanting to access behavior analytic intervention because such individuals are not appropriately trained in the science, and they may actually cause more problems that they are able to address. Of course, this problem is maintained by the fact that, well, other than in the United States, the field is not formally recognized and regulated elsewhere in the world. So anyone can call themselves a behavior analyst and offer some kind of behavior analytic intervention. Within some countries, there's a growing critical mass of appropriately trained people. For example, in the UK, where I am based and where I'm from. But for many countries, the problem is that there's no professional infrastructure to support the development of the field, and that's a big problem.
Very rightly said, Doctor. I totally agree, because I have seen even up here, there are private institutions who would say that we are giving an RBT training, and RBT stands for the Registered Behavior Technician. And when a local body says that we are doing an RBT technician training, actually what they're doing is they're training them to take an exam with the BSEB board, but they don't say that. And some of the people with just that training of 40, 50 hours, they have a certification and they call themselves to be the technicians, which actually they're not. So you're rightly saying, so can you please define what professional infrastructure is and why do we need it?
Yes, absolutely. And perhaps we'll come on to talk about the RBT and their role later. But when I talk about professional infrastructure, what I'm talking about is the infrastructure to support the training and development of behavior analysts. So those individuals that are working independently. And what I'm talking about specifically is the existence of postgraduate university training programs that cover the breadth and depth of the science of behavior analysis, which is why they have to be postgraduate training programs, if not master's degrees, if not doctoral programs. But a professional infrastructure also requires that there be a critical mass of appropriately trained and experienced individuals who themselves are able to teach and supervise others. And of course, there should be a range of organizations, school centers, or other places where individuals can work and develop and practice the skills and competencies of applied behavior analysts with ongoing on-site supervision. And those ought to be places that don't just tolerate the fact that one or two individuals are working there and engaging in certain skills, but where the culture of the workplace actually reinforces and embraces an evidence-based analytic approach to its work. So that's important.
Yes,
Many countries, of course, lack all of these things. But you really need, of all of those things, the university training programs and at least some individuals to teach and supervise others to really develop any kind of professional infrastructure. And I'm currently working with many countries on trying to establish those as prerequisites.
That's lovely. So does the board provide this kind of a support to a university in case a university is keen on, they can directly connect with the board and board would be able to, support the university?
Yes, in many different ways. What the BACB are helping with more specifically in that kind of example is relates to process issues rather than content issues. So we're not going to tell universities what they should and should not be teaching, but in terms of some of the processes that they might wish to go through in order to identify what they should be teaching in that particular country, because for some countries the infrastructure is quite different and the work that the practitioners are involved in is quite different, then that's the kind of support we would be able to help with, along with a variety of other kinds of supports.
Thank you very much, Dr. Martin. Can you throw some more light on the careers in the field of applied behavior analysis so that the young psychologists or the graduates in the field understand and value it, that what exactly are the kind of the career they get into once they complete applied behavior analysis?
Yeah, the majority of behavior analysts and the paraprofessionals associated with the community, such as technicians or teaching assistants or whatever countries call them, they work within the fields of autism and developmental disorders. And dependent on where you live, there may be frequent advertisements for roles within those fields. And actually, in many countries, the entire behavior analytic workforce and community may only be working with children with autism. And actually, if you wish for a career in this area, there are still not enough behavior analysts and paraprofessionals to address the need. So there ought to be plenty of opportunity just if you wish to work within that field. However, I would like to say that behavior analysts could and should be working in many different areas that would benefit from the strategies and tactics used by behavior analysts, some of which I mentioned earlier. Many individuals start their careers by getting some basic training and working as, for example, a technician, and then they decide to pursue their careers in a particular area because they like it so much, and then they go on and complete master's degrees or other postgraduate training in behavior analysis. However, given the issues I previously described in terms of the professional infrastructure or lack of professional infrastructure in many countries, those individuals that do pursue a career as a behavior analyst may end up having to work independently rather than as an employee within an organization that values them as a behavior analyst, because that just simply doesn't exist. I would say another option available to individuals who wish to pursue a career, and again, depending on where they live, would be to try and teach within a university, either as a full-time faculty, adjunct faculty, or even as a guest lecturer, and help establish behavior analysis training programs and disseminate information about behavior analysis through an appropriate university department. That will be a wonderful thing that individuals could do if they wish to pursue a career in this area.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for giving such a deep information to all those aspirants of the field. Can you say something about the scope of work of particularly an RBT, the Registered Behavior Technician?
Yeah, certainly. Well, so the RBT, the Registered Behavior Technician, is the BACB's technician level credential. So it's our lowest level credential. And I have avoided talking specifically about BACB credentials because, as I'm sure many of your listeners will realize, from 2023 onwards, we're no longer offering access to certification to those living outside of many countries, including UAE. Now, and that decision was made after lengthy and thorough assessment and analysis of a range of issues involved in offering certification programs worldwide. And the BACB has already provided comprehensive rationale for that decision, which I don't have time to go over right now. But you asked me about the scope of an RBT. The RBT was never designed to be a credential for an independent practitioner. The RBT is someone that must work under the supervision of someone with sufficient skills and competencies within the field. In other words, a behavior analyst, as defined or at least described in terms of the training I mentioned earlier. And not only that, but the supervisor of an RBT must take responsibility for their caseload and general work, including having contracts with any clients or families to whom the RBT is providing services. Now, I mention that because it's a great concern of mine that individuals are completing RBT training, and there are many offerings of this around the world, but in the absence of finding or perhaps even wanting a supervisor, they're then going out into the world and working independently and telling unsuspecting clients that they are trained as RBTs or have had RBT training. And of course, many clients will not understand the difference between someone who is an RBT versus someone who has had RBT training. And because they're not RBTs, because they don't have supervisors and they probably haven't taken the exam and they're not registered with the BACB has no jurisdiction over them. So my advice to anyone and everyone is that they should directly employ or hire a behavior analyst rather than an RBT, ensuring that the behavior analyst is appropriately trained and qualified, and then let the identify any required technicians that the clients may need, because they will be supervising them. So give that responsibility to them. And also, if anyone claims to be an RBT, then of course you can check whether they are or not by looking them up in the BACB register, and also checking to see that they're active and that they have a supervisor listed.
Thank you so much, Dr. Martin, for actually stressing on this fact, because rightly said, so that RBT is actually whether they are registered or not registered with the board, whether they have their active licensing or not, and that depends on whether they have a supervisor or not. So it's really a better deal to have a behavior analyst appointed, and then RBT can automatically be brought into the scene instead of the other way out. And as you mentioned that by 2023 things are going to be changed, it's going to be different. So which all countries would still continue with it? And will the people who are interested would have to travel to those countries to procure the certification?
Well, at the point we made the announcement, which was the end of 2019, we said that the access to the certification was going to be restricted to individuals who reside in the US and Canada. But we also offered the opportunity for countries to apply to us to request that they continue to have access to BACB certification. And several countries have applied, and the UK and Australia are two countries where you will still have access to BACB certification from 2023. Although in the case of the UK, it's just a 3-year extension rather than indefinite access. So the answer to your question is, if you, from 2023, if you are residing in the US, Canada, the UK, or Australia, you are still able to apply for one of our BACB credentials. But you have to reside there. So and that will be determined by your application address and subsequent correspondence address. So it won't be possible, or at least should not be possible, to simply travel to one of those countries to take the exam. Our expectation is that you are living in that country. You don't necessarily have to have a passport from that country, but you have to be living, you have to be residing in that country and really working in that country in order to be take our exam and work as a credentialed individual in that country.
And otherwise, the countries are supposed to be applying and requesting from now till 2023, and probably a couple of more countries will get added on to the list.
Well, I mean, it's possible. It's not simply a case of they fill in a form and send it to us and we look at the form and say yes or no. It requires a much more thorough analysis in terms of things like the legal liability for the BACB in operating certification and offering access to it in those countries. So it's a whole range of factors, and we also take into account existing infrastructure within a country. So, for example, are there university training programs where people can get the training in that country? Are there available and accessible test sites where people can take the exam in the country? And so on. Is there a reasonable probability that sufficient numbers of people will pursue BACB certification in that country to make it worthwhile for us to make it available in that country, and so on. So we will see. As it stands, those are the 4 countries where that will still be an option from 2023.
Thank you so much for this piece of information, and I'm sure it's going to help a lot of aspiring candidates or the parents who've been having a kind of a doubt in their mind, but now listening to you, it gives a lot of clarity. I would like to ask you, as the session will be attended by parents of the children facing a lot of behavioral challenges, can you offer some kind of a guidance about applied behavior analysis for their day-to-day interactions?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, one of the interesting things, well, certainly in my opinion, one wonderful things about being a behavior analyst and the training experience involved in that is that it changes your worldview, and I think for the better. And one of the important differences is how one views the world. So looking at the world through the lens of a behavior analyst is a somewhat different prospect altogether, and involves an understanding of what we do and what other people do in terms of it being a product of their learning history and environmental circumstances, not an aspect of their self or personality, or as Skinner termed it, autonomous man. So why I'm saying this is, in terms of my advice to parents of children who may perhaps engage in behaviors that are challenging, is to say to the parents, please remember that your children are engaging in such behavior because of environmental circumstances and the fact that these behaviors are being reinforced, probably inadvertently, almost certainly inadvertently, not because they're being naughty, selfish, willful, and so on. So the question then becomes for parents, what is happening in the environment that leads to the emission of problem behavior, and how is it being maintained for my child? Now, sometimes those analyses can be quite complicated and require a detailed functional analysis, but sometimes the answer is obvious. But in either case, once you know what is maintaining the problem behavior, as parents, you can do something about it. So just to give you a couple of simple examples, if a child is having a temper tantrum, that it may be being maintained by the attention it gets from his or her parents. So, for example, the more a child cries or screams or throws objects or whatever they're doing, the more attention the parents may give them, in order, at least as far as the parents are concerned, to console their distressed child. Now, of course, in such a situation, the amount of attention received for engaging in a tantrum ought to be minimal, because it's the attention that's actually maintaining the tantrum. And the attention probably also ought to be just restricted to keeping the child safe and nothing more than that. However, in such a situation, the parents need to ensure that the child is lavished with plenty of high quality attention when they engage in appropriate behaviors, such as playing nicely, sharing, waiting their turn, and all those kinds of things. To give you one more example, on the other hand, a very similar looking tantrum may have been learned because it allows the child to escape or avoid from something they really wish to do, such as doing their homework or tidying up. So the parent says, hey, off you go and do your homework, and the child has a massive tantrum. And in such a situation, what may happen is the parents may again console the child, have them sit down and calm down, but crucially not follow through on the request to finish their homework. And of course, in such a situation, because actually letting them not do the homework is what's maintaining the tantrum, and teaching them that having a tantrum gets them out of a homework, what ought to happen is the parent should follow through with a request rather than simply stopping the activity. Now, that's easier said than done, but it may be that the parents follow through with the request, but it's for a relatively short period of time, something that's doable by the child, rather than, an hour's worth of homework. It may be, okay, 2 more minutes of homework and then you can have a break, that kind of thing. But crucially, what the parents need to know before they make such decisions is why the child is engaging in problem behavior. And as I said before, this may require that a behavior analyst conduct a functional analysis. But once the parents know about this stuff, they can see what their child is doing through these terms. It can make a huge difference to how they interact with their child, and whether their interactions, and certainly their interactions in terms of problem behaviors, are appropriate or not. One more important thing to mention in terms of parents and things that they ought to be thinking about is, if your child is engaging in a tantrum to get attention from you, or if they're engaging in a tantrum in order to escape from something, try and make sure that you're teaching them or helping someone teach them appropriate and alternative ways of doing those things. So there are easier ways to ask for attention or ask for a break than having a tantrum. And as long as you can ensure that the child practices those things and reinforce them when they happen, by giving attention or letting them have a break, then that's a wonderful thing and an easy thing that parents could do, assuming they know about this stuff.
Thank you so much, Dr. Martin. And I think it's a brilliant piece of advice to all those parents who are struggling, and especially with the tantrums of the children. And many a times, unknowingly, we reinforces an unwanted behavior. So the moment the parents are aware of these kind of techniques, it certainly make parenting more powerful and you get the desired results. Thank you so much for sharing this with our parents. But I would like to ask you this question: do you think a parent can make a good therapist?
Well, that's an interesting question, and I suppose my answer to that is yes and no. Of course, parents are the individuals that know their child best, unquestionably. But of course, they're also the individuals that have the greatest bond to the child and therefore are the most susceptible to subjective and emotive decision-making regarding the child. So my personal view, this is Neil Martin's view, not necessarily my professional view, although it's difficult to disentangle the two sometimes. But my personal view is that parents are the ones that ought to be ensuring that the child has opportunities to practice the skills and competences that are being taught to them, whether it be in school or in other settings. And not only that, but ensuring that there are frequent opportunities to practice these things, and that there are opportunities to generalize the skills that children are learning in different ways. So, for example, across different people, different settings, and so on. So I think that's what the focus of parents ought to be on, particularly in terms of supporting behavioral intervention programs. Now, having said that, some parents can be good teachers, but sadly many are not, and the parental relationship can create all sorts of conflicts. For example, not wanting to follow through with a specific task when they perceive that the child may be upset or tired or hungry or whatever it happens to be. The only other thing I would say about that, in terms of parents being therapists, if you as a parent wish to train as a therapist, a technician, or even a behavior analyst, then you cannot ethically be working with your own child while you're developing those skills and competencies, or indeed with your wife or husband or other family member, just because of the obvious potential for conflict. So if you wish to pursue this training, then you have to be doing it independently with other clients. So just to make that point. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Dr. Martin. And I totally agree to you, because all through my career, I have seen a lot of things which others can see because of their emotions or whatever the cause. A parent's denial becomes very big. A lot of things they're not able to see which others can see, and probably that could be a hindrance in the process of learning. What would be your message to young graduates who are keen to work in the field of behavior analysis?
Well, I have a very simple message to you young graduates. Please work in, please come and work in the field. Behavior analysts are desperately needed in the world, all over the world. And we now live in a world where there are a huge range of human behavior issues that we need to work with and solve, if not fix. And I mentioned some earlier, and including the raging pandemic at the moment. So let me say to you, young graduates, working as a behavior analyst is hugely rewarding for so many reasons. When you see the significant changes to behavior that you can make or help make, that make people's lives so much better and so much richer, that is intensely reinforcing. Even things as simple as, for example, teaching a child to sit down and enjoy a dinner with their family where they couldn't before. Or, and here's another example from something I was involved in, teaching an individual to, or maybe desensitizing is a better word, an individual to fly for several hours to a different country so that the family can enjoy a holiday vacation together where they couldn't before. Now, these are things that are immeasurable, not easily captured by data collection, but are hugely reinforcing for those working with those individuals and, of course, for the families themselves. So there are so many different areas that you could become involved. So please go for it, do it.
Thank you so much, Dr. Martin. And I'm telling you, it's been an amazing 30 minutes just flew off, and I just saw, oh my God, the time is over. The fact remains that, you know, when you've been in the field for so many years, you've been practicing it, so it comes right from the bottom of your heart. And I'm sure that it's going to be a great help for all the, you know, upcoming technicians, analysts who dream and desire to have this as a profession, and rightly said that this is the time when you need to, you know, put the cord at place, because there is immense need. Every field of life, behavior is the very, very important component. And if you as an analyst can work towards or around it, what not, you can make a difference in your personal life, professional life, people around you. And that is something lovely. Thank you so much, Dr. Martin, for being with us. And it's indeed a pleasure to start our very first episode of Empower the Determined with this topic of behavior analysis. Thank you so much for your time. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And I hope to see you in person at some point. That will be lovely.
Certainly. Look forward to see you, Dr. Martin.
Okay, bye-bye. Bye, everyone. Bye.